And we're back for the CEO Advantage podcast with my co-host, Millie Albers from Milco.
Hello, good to be back.
It's great to be back with you. And we have a fabulous guest, as we always do. But this one, I have to declare an interest. Alan and I are long-term friends, great friends. We talk about business and not business things and collecting cars and doing all of them. We'll cover some of those things today. Before I introduce Alan himself, I don't normally read from the bios, but Alan's is different from any of the other ones. So I'm going to read Alan's today and then we'll get started with Alan. Alan's the managing director of the Tudorovic group of companies and has overseen the daily operations of the group for more than 20 years. Between 2017 and 22, Alan played an integral role in divesting the family's interests in its South Australian companies. As part of restructuring operations, Alan successfully rebranded the Davelin group of companies, which has had its interests predominantly invested in the concrete industry, to the Tudorovic group of companies, which focuses on property acquisitions, developments, and commercial fishing, and many of the other family businesses there. The reason I wanted to read that out is because most of our guests, we talk about founding the business and developing it and growing it. Alan's role, which has been very different from everybody else's, Alan's is to manage the divestment of a complex group of companies, yet still maintain the integrity of what's been built, but simplifying it. Very interesting, different version of the story. Welcome, Alan Tudorovic.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. We ask everybody, though, the same first question, and that is, what was the first job you got paid for?
First job was probably 14 years old, and I had a neighbour going to Bali, and I wanted to go, and Mum said, "Oh, well, you've got to contribute to that." So I started a car cleaning business in the local neighbourhood and cleaned cars. Probably for about 6, 7, 8 months to, raise some money to go to Bali for 10 days. And then probably after school, probably my first paid job would have been a first fix carpenter, where I helped out one of my dad's mates build the frames for his house for about, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And I think he paid me $25 a day. And I just, again, thought that was so much money as a lad who just turned 17. So, but yes, carpentry it certainly taught me that carpentry was not my thing.
Especially for $25 a day.
That's right.
You know what's interesting? I think Alan's is the third car washing entrepreneur that we've had. And what's exciting about that one is that a kid today can still do that one.
That's right.
So there's ones that say I was a paper boy or I did these things. But the really good thing about the car washing one is you can still do it. It's
teaches
fantastic.
you good discipline too, how to wash a car properly, So
yeah. Indeed. We can talk about that one all day as well. So, Alan, you did the carpentry thing, but when you left school, you pretty much went into the family business.
Yep.
Straight from school. Before we get into that, tell us, what was the family business then? And how did it come about? So just at the time you entered it.
The time I entered it, the family business was ready-mix concrete curbing, paving and sand quarrying. Mm-hmm. So, and then when I entered it, probably that would have been 1990, so it would have been 17. It probably was at the beginning of a real growth stage. Mm-hmm. We just sort of, I can clearly remember that my father had bought this factory, and at that time it was Elizabeth West, and I remember that just to me seemed so far away that you were taking this drive up Main North Road, and he had bought this paving factory because as part of his contracts he was doing the curbing and then paving for local government. So local government was one of our biggest customers, and then concrete supply for commercial builders and things like that. And then the sand operation was to supply sand to our concrete plants. Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting time to join the company because it really was at a growth stage.
Yeah. Let's just put a pin in that for a second and hold that, because we'll come back to that point in time. But let's fast forward to 2017. That was the business you entered. By 2017, what was the business you were now running?
At that time?
Yeah.
It was very much still the same, but it had just exploded. Like, we were quarries, concrete plants. We'd gone from 1 concrete plant to 4 concrete plants, huge precast manufacturing factories. Trucks. I mean, I always have this story that somebody one day, we were just having a bit of a strategy meeting, and he said, "Oh, you're in the transport business." And I said, "No, I'm not in the transport business. We're in, a construction material company." And, "Well, how many trucks have you got?" "Oh, probably 35. Mate, you're in the transport business." But that was a funny thing as well. You just sort of didn't think about it. The trucks were how you got your materials to your customers, and so it was quite a big concern in 2017. So,
but that was a part of a group of companies that also did fishing.
Yes,
had got into hospitality.
Yep. So then we've being of a Croatian background. We've always been involved in commercial fishing, so it seems like a funny combination, sort of concrete and fishing.
I read it. I was like, "Oh, this is going to be fun."
Yeah, but that's just one of the things. The Croatian community, they settled in Port Lincoln, and my father was one of those early pioneers of commercial fishing. So always had these prawn boats in fishing the Spencer Gulf, and then we had, by that time, interests in Croatia, where we'd built up a resort company in Croatia as well. So,
and that still exists.
And that still exists today, and the commercial fishing still exists today.
Yeah.
So let's go back again, but we'll go back before 1990, before you've joined the business. Tell us, how did the business come about? Your dad came to Australia from Croatia?
Yeah, so he was an immigrant from Croatia, and at that time, Croatia was Yugoslavia and under communist rule. So, all these, men and women with 16, 17 years old and looking for a way, to get out of that regime. So him and his mate decided one day that how are they going to get out of this country? So their story goes that he got a rowboat, and I think there was about 4 of them that were meant to meet on the other side. We are from the Adriatic part of Croatia, so he was born on an island. They're going to meet on the island. They're going to row their boat to Italy. So then when they rolled up there, instead of 4 people, there was 20 people. Word had got out. But such brave things for these immigrants to have done. They literally don't say goodbye to their parents, because then you put your parents in danger. So he might have written a note and just said he was off. And they rowed that boat to Italy. And my father always just says that he just had a compass, and they just put the compass on the bow of that rowboat, and they rowed.
Wow.
So now he didn't have any dramas. They did get there safely. It took about 4 days. But a friend of his told a story that the Yugoslav patrol boats did come past, and they machine gunned the patrol boats, and then they were all survived, but then they ripped their clothes and plugged up the rowboat with their clothes so the boat didn't sink, and kept on rowing. So that's how he escaped, and then they were based in Italy for probably a year, and then he was quite lucky that his sister was in Australia, and he flew out to Australia and settled in Adelaide, and they just became labourers, and he tried various different jobs, but he sort of settled on concrete. And then probably that would have been sort of 57, so he would have done various labouring jobs. And then in 1964, the company was started, which was predominantly curbing. That was always that's where the business started.
So how old was he then
when he started? That must have been 23, 24. So
so this is, and he was how old when he rowed across?
He would have been 18.
18.
Yeah.
So we've just celebrated my youngest son's 18th birthday, and it's quite amazing to think about Griffin getting in a rowboat and rowing for 4 days with a whole bunch of people that he didn't invite
No.
to come along.
Yep.
And where are you going? You don't know where you're going, what's happening. Like they are incredible stories. The stories of the migrants.
And so he started concrete curbing.
Started concrete curbing.
Bought a curbing machine.
Yeah, and then started doing that all by hand. Like there were no machines. Even the concrete trucks that didn't really exist then too. So he often talks about, just mixing the concrete by hand. So just backbreaking work and just incredible hours and then that would have sort of been the beginning of like Hectorville. There's a really beautiful photo that we have of Dad, and I want to say it's like Reed Avenue, Hectorville, and he's doing the curbing of that road there, which is a road now you sort of drive around. So, and then the business just steadily, but he employed all the Italians, all the Croatians. These are all hard working men. And it just grew and grew and grew. So, and then at one point he was working, if I just go back a step, then he was working for somebody, and then he decided one day that, that he would do that himself. And he knew one of the local engineers at Tea Tree Gully Council, and he knocked on that man's door, and as a man who didn't speak English very well, and just said, if I go out and buy my own boards, buy my own equipment, will you support me? And that man, who was friends with Dad his whole life, he has passed away now, just thought what guts it took for that man to knock on this guy's door and say, if I do this, will you support me? And he did. And that's how that construction or curbing business started. So then it was on. Then that was sort of all Tea Tree Gully, Modbury. That would have all been new suburbs, around that time, sort of in that sort of, late 60s, early 70s. And then he was very big at doing country work. He'd go up to Lee Creek and, disappear. That's the other thing. I mean, as a son of a successful man there, you never really saw him. Like, he was gone. Like, you might have wandered back on the weekends but they were doing, Whyalla, Port Lincoln, Roxby Downs, just sort of all over the state. So
it was and we've had lots of people talk about luck here and luck sort of as the intersection of preparation and opportunity. But at that time, and for those old people like us who grew up in the 70s, the sides of roads was just bitumen, and there was not.
That's it. Yep.
The gutters and curbing that is there today. That was it was a huge,
massive. There was just that's all infrastructure. There just simply wasn't any, So, and Dad had definitely made that decision that a lot of his mates went to work in a factory environment, whether it be Holden's or whatever that environment was when manufacturing was huge back then. But he just said back then, he clearly did the numbers. And what, you want me to work 10 hours a day on a line, I only get this many pounds, or I can pour this much curbing, work like really, really hard. But the difference in money was huge. And he's like, well, that's a no-brainer. I'm going to go do that. So, and just chipped away until he became the biggest concrete buyer in Adelaide. And then he thought, well, hang on a minute. Why am I buying concrete? So then that's when the concrete plant started, sort of in the very early 80s. And
so as the group grew, it really took over the supply chain for the initial business, and then everything that supplied the business.
Yep. It
became part of the business.
Exactly that. So that's probably, definitely just like jumping ahead. It went from curbing to then, okay, we can supply our own concrete. Then we're buying pavers off, these big, Australian or national companies. We can start our own paving plant. Then we're buying sand from, again, national companies like big boys like Boral, or back in the day it was Pioneer Concrete. And, well, we can do our own sand. And you just kept bolting on the supply chain. So, but from its early start, it was pretty interesting having, like, I can have memories of growing up in Ross Trevor and being a young lad of about 10 years old. But, Friday was payday, and then all these men would just come to the house, and you'd have those little yellow envelopes. Yeah. That's before my time, but I can clearly remember that, it was all cash. Like, so, and my mother did all the bookkeeping, and you think about that now, just how outrageous that would have been, that, every second Friday, Mum would have wandered down to the Commonwealth Bank on the Glyn corner and put 30 grand cash in her purse and wander out because
put it all in little envelopes.
And then you're sitting there putting it all in the little envelopes and working out the timesheets. But that's what it was. You got paid cash, and it was so that's where you always knew that there was something a bit different about our family because you just grew up with that. The employees were always around. There were barbecues.
Did you enjoy it? Like, it sounds like it would have been a great...
It was always chaos. There was never a quiet moment in the Tudorovic household, I can tell you that much, because there was just always these, people around, or you'd have backhoes in the backyard, or tractors and trucks. And, as a kid, it was awesome. You'd be sitting there jumping in and out of trucks or being on a backhoe. So it was a real interesting childhood having, this business just happening all the time. So,
and what part... How old were you when did your dad ever say, all right, Alan, one day you're going to be doing this? Or
he didn't actually sort of say that, but you were always involved. I've got really clear memories, and Paul and I have talked about this, of driving, where, on Saturdays. And so I just don't really remember seeing Dad much during the week. But then, Saturday mornings, then he would go out and he would measure the amount of curbing that he'd poured, during that week. And then, I would have only been 10, and he had a XF Falcon Ute, and then he used to have a wheel that you would measure the concrete with, but then he'd say, Alan, you drive. So then I'd be driving, and then his hand would be out on the side of the road, like measuring the curbing, and you'd be over the wheel driving. But again, they just thought nothing of that. And quite frankly, neither did I. Thought it was quite normal to be driving a car. It wasn't on roads because you were in subdivisions or new roads or things like that. But you were in amongst it all the time. But I can certainly always remember having good relationships with the employees. They were all almost like protectors. They knew who you were and they looked after you. And when you were sort of going out with Dad, so you were part of the business always.
Yeah.
Was there a moment as a boy, or was it much later as an adult, that you realised that as a boy you weren't doing the things that your family wasn't doing, the things that maybe some of the other boys in the neighbourhood?
I definitely think no, it was pretty early. I think there's a big difference even as a boy between 10 and 14. So my clear memories of definitely, we grew up in a very modest home in Rostrevor, and I always sort of remembered that being quite normal. And then one of the big contracts that Dad did was Westlakes. He did all of the footpath work, all of the curbing work. And he went down there, and a lot of Croatians did. They all sort of were on that Rostrevor, Campbelltown side. And then there was something about Westlakes that they liked, that water. And that sort of maybe reminded them of home. And so a whole heap of Croatians moved from the east to the west. And that's when I sort of thought, oh, hang on a minute, things are... You knew you were in a serious family business there. And I would say it would have been then that Dad really started, almost not courting you, but, teaching you the ways of the business and teaching you how to talk to people. And I'm also the youngest in my family, which I think is my story is very different to my brothers and my sister, because you are the youngest by a fair few years. So, when Mum and Dad were going out for business dinners or things like that, I was always there. So I learned from a really early age how to talk to people and how to chat with adults. Always felt comfortable with adults. Always felt comfortable with people beyond my years. And you learnt that. So that probably wasn't normal. Like going out for business dinners, and it would be the boss of Unley Council, or it would be the boss of Port Adelaide Council, or big construction firms, and you learnt how to network really from a very early age. And for me that was quite normal. So, and
were you aware of the other kids? So you're meeting these powerful people and different business people. Did they have Alans coming along as well that you got to know? Or
no, my memory is I was always on my own. So whether there was just again being the youngest, their kids might have been older. No, I never ever remember meeting another kid at the table.
Were your
So-
siblings involved in the business, or are they involved?
They are now, yeah. So at the time, that particular time, my brother would have been in England. So that's David, and my other brother was on the fishing boat.
Oh, of course.
So he's a skipper of the boats. That's a different sort of vibe out there. That's definitely you're out on the seas, and then my sister was a teacher, so in Port Pirie.
So it's 1990 something.
Yep.
You've got a job.
Got a job.
You got a job in the family business.
Yep.
What was your job in the family business?
So the very first job was actually, I was probably bludgeoning there for a couple of months where you finish school, then you wonder what you're going to do. And Dad just clearly walked in and just said, that's it. You know, I might have had a month off of just doing nothing. And that's it. If you're not going to go to university, get up to the factory. So I did that. And my first job was, strapping bricks, sorting bricks, getting my forklift license and, organising all the taking the bricks from the manufacturing side and out into the yard. Pretty basic stuff. So definitely starting from that ground level. And I did that pretty solidly, for, I reckon, 2 years. And then you were always, given little errands that you had to sort of do within the company. But generally that was my station, learning that paving business. And then one day, one of our yardmen had a car accident and was he was hurt pretty badly. So he was off work. He was fine in the end, but somebody had to fill that position, and that's where I felt that things really started to change for me. That you went out into the yard, and that's when you start to learn what are you really good at. And I was always an orderly person, so that yard made sense to me. Like you've got all your different products, and it was a little bit chaotic the way the guy had looked after it. And that's when I first started to think, I can do this in a better way, and had that yard all sorted, and it's bricks in their right colours, bricks in their right styles, and then loved all that. Started doing the transport side of the business and loading up trucks, and then so then that sort of happened quite rapidly, where I was the yardman, and then I got a little sniff of like, hang on a minute, we're paying these contractors to cart our bricks. And so I reckon I was about 18 when I saw a truck for sale on South Road, Regency Park. And I remember it was $38,000. And I said to Dad, if I go to the bank and I borrow that, will you guarantee the loan? And I'll cart bricks for you at a contract rate. And he said, yep, off you go. So that was 18 was when I probably first started my business on the side and employed my first employee at 18.
How about that?
Wow.
And
he could barely drive a truck, but he bought one and employed a guy to drive it.
And I started
experience driving.
Yeah, that's right. And then started sort of carting bricks, and then I bought another truck and started carting sand for our family business as well. But that's when I sort of really felt like you started to grow up, and I really enjoyed that side. And then a real change for me also was that we were always supplying to government and things like that. We never had a retail side of the business. And then people started coming up to our yard all the time, like, can I buy pavers for my driveway and pavers for around the house? And it was just like, well, of course you can. Well, hang on a minute, we need to work out a retail price list, and all of that came really naturally to me. So that was a real changing moment as well, where you thought, well, hang on a minute. I can clearly remember going to the old man saying, there's a whole market out here that we're not selling to. It's called the retail market. And he's like, what's that? So then really started to build that up.
And you created a brand.
Yeah, you sort of, you did.
People still remember.
They still remember it. Like,
What was that brand?
That company was called Tudor Pavers, and I can still, like, that's a story a bit later on, but we did close that company in 2013, but people will still refer to me, you're Alan from Tudor Pavers.
Oh, really?
So it was a solid brand. We did build that company up, really to be very popular within the market, and you were always competing with national companies like Boral and Rockler, and so you were always the underdog, sort of fighting from below. But that's what sort of worked. That's why people liked us. So that was a real changing thing. And I've heard you talk about that before. Being a salesman that's when I thought, that's now this is what I'm good at. Chatting to people and talking to people. And probably all those lessons learnt from sitting around the table there with mum and dad and being not forced initially, of course, when you're a young lad, start chatting to people. It all works out well when you're sort of in your early 20s and you've got that confidence to start talking to people wandering in from the street, or counsellors, deciding which paver are they going to buy. Or
one of the things, if we can just, again, putting a pin in that for a moment, one of the things that's really, really valuable for David in the earlier podcast episode talks about being a dad and how important that is. But the value of career conversations and the effect that has on children. So the identity of children later on, where they don't realise at the time, or even into adulthood, realise, actually, I created my identity as an entrepreneur or as a leader before I was conscious that I was, because I heard it, I was surrounded by it, I knew the language, I knew even the posture of people or where they sat or what they did. And that there are particularly lots of young people who are spending so much time on screens that they're not participating in those career conversations, or there are families where those conversations don't happen. But I think this is a really, some of the stories that Alan's telling now is around that. I suddenly realised I was quite good at this. It's like, I didn't know I was learning these skills until...
That's exactly right. You didn't really know until all of a sudden you're out there using it. And even with my two boys now, I'm always talking about that, whether it's the most basic thing of when you shake someone's hand. You don't shake someone's hand and look down. You shake someone's hand, you look at their eyes, making sure that they're engaging with people.
So that idea of again, this idea we talked about with on our other podcasts around these things that are implicit becoming explicit, where you just realise, actually, I'm doing something unconsciously that actually, if I do it intentionally, I can use that and get better at it. And you're very good at it.
And you learn that as you go along. You've got to deal with customers' complaints. You've got to deal with demands. You've got to deal with unreasonable unhappiness with product or something like that. There's all sorts of situations that you get yourself into there. So the mix between that and then the back end of the business, which was staff, like then looking after staff, you learnt on the job really quickly. So but I think back now as I'm in my early 50s and just think sort of wow, how did I do that? Because you sort of were pretty young, but you did it because you were prepped from it. You were prepped from an early age, even though, again, you didn't really know that you were being prepped. So,
can you remember one of those earliest, difficult situations when you were starting out, 18, 19, 20, and like a story? There's always like that first story, I feel like, in business where you just remember a difficult client, a difficult customer, whatever. Do you remember that, and how did you overcome that?
I think the things that I found difficult, clients I was always really good with. If I think back of where it takes an enormous amount of time to learn how to deal with staff. And then you're also in an environment where it's labour intensive. You are in a factory environment. And dealing with staff that you had to let go. That first thing when you're a young lad and you might be 21, 22, and you've actually got to get to the point where you're sacking somebody. Oh boy, did I make some mistakes there. Because it's never nice to say you move somebody along in the first place. But you made some just shocking mistakes there.
What were they?
I think in just how you managed it, and then being so young and then dealing, of course, you've let somebody go, and then those emotions that are being thrown back at you, which you're just not expecting as a 22-year-old, even though you should be, but you're just not thinking about it. And then, of course, it could be a bit fiery, or if somebody, just was getting really angry with you because they thought it was completely unreasonable that you were sacking them, and you're only 22. And that's that thing. You're probably talking with people in their early 30s. There's always that strange age difference that you've got a little bit of authority there, but not really knowing how to use it correctly.
Did you ever feel that ageism that people just looked at you like, oh, you're the
For sure.
son's,
For sure.
the boss's son,
Yeah.
22, what does he know?
Yeah. But it drove me crazy. But that's what you had to. I always sort of say, it's probably one of the things people who don't know me would maybe can always say that because it's a cheap throwaway line.
Mm-hmm.
But I always feel you've got to work harder when it's when you're the sun coming up through because you've got nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
So and I can tell you now, if you weren't good at it, the old man would have been the first one to sack me or kick me up the arse or so.
In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business. So you were an entrepreneur in your own right, though. You could, even though you'd grown up with it and you'd heard it, you weren't necessarily conscious of what you were learning.
No.
But at 18, you're behaving similarly to your father in the sense of you see an opportunity, you borrow some money, you buy a truck.
Did not seem weird to me at all. Right?
Yeah.
That's really,
isn't it interesting? Cool. He didn't know he knew it.
So 21, 22, I reckon I would have had, then again, this we started our display. We had really beautiful displays of pavers. Then we just we had a bit of land. And we thought, well, hang on a minute, why don't we start a landscaping yard? And then we had another friend who was really good at plants, and so then we had our paving display, and then we had a nursery with landscape supplies, and I called that Hug a Tree Nursery. So, and that was quite successful for a few, for quite some time as well. But thinking back now, I mean, I would have been 23, and by that time I would have had maybe 3 truck drivers, 4 people in the landscape yard. So, but again, this is sort of a little bit all on the side. Your day job was. My day job then was selling pavers. It was Tudor Pavers 100%, and then you had all those interactions of staff sort of, on the side in truck driving positions and landscaping positions. And then I can always remember I worked it was 12 days on, 2 days off. So, and you're also 22, so you're also out, partying a little bit as well. And but we talk about that, yes, you go out and party, but 2:00 on a Saturday night when you're at the Nord Hotel or at closing, but 7:30 Sunday morning, like I was at Elizabeth,
hungover.
you worked. And that 12 days on, 2 days off, I did that for years. And that's why sometimes you get frustrated and people say, oh, it was given to you. It's like,
you worked.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so you've now you're 22. You've notwithstanding you've learned and you've watched it. You're branching out into your own sort of things as well as the family business. So unlike most 22-year-olds, you've got multiple jobs.
Multiple jobs, yeah.
Not a job. Some of which you're employed, some of which you're the employer as a 22-year-old. And then you did, because that wasn't enough, you bought some land and decided, I'm going to develop.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Like a few years later, but still maybe, that might have been 27. I think I my old man had a piece of land at Monopara, and so that might have been 2000. Monopara, there was nothing at Monopara.
There was nothing there, yeah.
And then, so they were up there looking at that one day, and then I thought, well, this all sounds quite reasonable. I had bought my first home at 24. I could remember that I was about 24 when I bought that, and had a little bit of equity in there. And so then I thought, well, I'll buy the neighbouring block to the old man. So I reckon I would have been about 27 then. And then I knocked on this lady's door, and she had 5 acres of land at Monopara, and went in and had a chat. I remember sitting on the sort of lazy boy chair, having a cup of tea, and just being very clear. Well, these are all the prices that have been paid for land in Monopara. And I said, I'll give you $20,000 more. And she was ready. She was ready to downsize into something like that. So we did the deal in that lazy boy chair. And I bought that 5 acres of land thinking there was just nothing out there. Thinking, I'll sit on that, I'll land bank that for 10 years or something like that. That's probably what I thought at the time. And then, everyone has that little story of what deal sort of made them. Now, that was the deal that at that time sort of did really well. And within 2 years, Monopara was exploding. And I can remember even submitting to the council that the size of the blocks would be, 1,200 square metre blocks, because, that's what it was.
That's 3 or 4 blocks now.
And but they just back then said, oh, no. Like you have a range of blocks, So even then you were learning at the time. So it was sort of 300 square metres. The biggest was maybe 700 square metres. So that was a brilliant exercise to sort of get into there. So from the time of buying that to developing that, it might have only been 3 years instead of what I thought might have been 10 years, because the market had just, really exploded. So you start doing all sorts of little things. You're doing some property development.
So there's a couple of things he did. Let's not let him just brush past that one.
Hang on.
So, I mean, Andrew Nunn told a similar story, didn't he, of buying an underdeveloped, unloved sort of piece of land and saying, well, I'll just see what happens, and being offered to sell it for more than he paid for it, and said, no, I'll just keep that and I'll develop it later. But I think the thing that we shouldn't just let skip by, and our listeners will pick up if they're driving along listening to it, 27-year-old knocks on old lady's door, has a clipboard with lists of prices on it that properties are paid, and I'll pay more.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable little vignettes there of insight and skill that many people, so many people, when we talk about the value of selling skills and the value of human skills, I think
the key is there is also being genuine as well. You're not knocking on the door like some cheap salesman, or you knew those. You're talking about like she wasn't an elderly lady, but make sure she was feeling safe, that you weren't doing anything silly or dodgy. It was a genuine, I like this guy, I'm going to sell to him.
Now with the skills that you will learn from being a kid.
But being genuine, being kind, keeping her safe, all of those different things. But how many people won't knock on a door, get overwhelmed by all the negative spiraling? What if she says, no, I'll go back to my phone. I'll send her an email. Or a text. No, you knock on the door and you get ready to knock on the door, and then you think about how she's going to feel when you knock on the door. These are skills, I think, that we shouldn't skip past, because I think in this digital era, this age of AI, many of the skills that young people and older people as well are potentially not valuing to the level that they should is exactly the skills that Alan's talking about. That he thought about keeping her safe. He thought about being a good guy. He thought about being genuine and giving her more than the other people around the place. That genuine humanity, they're the skills that are going to be incredibly rare and incredibly valuable, and where value will be created. So I didn't want to skip over that story, because I just think it's
a big part of my 20s, those late teen years, 20s, is learning how to talk to people, and the fact that you're sitting there saying that it's going to be rare really worries me in the future with young people coming through. I mean, I'm not particularly noticing it too much, but yeah, it's if the fact that it's going to be a skill, I find interesting. Something that you just take for granted. Like,
but then it makes me think, like, what else is there that you was a given back when you were in your 20s? Like, what other skills are there that young kids need to learn from?
I think the big one there is confidence. Like, you need the confidence to walk up to that door and knock on it. I'm a huge believer, if you don't ask, you don't get. I mean, I put myself into the most embarrassing situations because I've asked and been told no. That's okay.
It's okay.
Is there a no that sticks in you? Alan and I have talked about this a lot. Of both of us have this notion of going, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but you do run the risk of having some embarrassing no's.
Yeah.
Is there one that sticks in your mind where it's like, oh, that one?
I don't know if it was
hurt?
embarrassing, but really pushing hard. I remember selling sand to just we did it in the end, but we were a manufacturer of pavers, and then we were wanting to sell sand to Boral, which were manufacturing pavers, and I think initially he just thought that was outrageous. Like, but you're our competition. We can't buy sand from you. You're our opposition on the paver side. And he was like, no. It's like, but it's almost, come on, like they're two different businesses.
Yes.
So eventually we sort of worked our way through that one. But he just thought the initial idea was sort of a bit outlandish, like, and definitely gave us a no. But we were like, no, it's two different things here.
Yeah.
So not the no's, you just keep on moving on. We would have been told no heaps of times. So, but I don't remember anything particularly sort of embarrassing or.
I have one where I remember in my water filtration business. I was 24, and in Sydney we had a water filtration business, and we knocked on doors. And we had an appointment in St Ives in New South Wales, and there's quite a strong South African community in St Ives, and I'd never really met somebody with a ferocious South African accent before. But boy, this man's name is burned into my memories. But I can remember going there, and he was very ferocious. And he said, "I don't drink this shit. I have whiskey." But I said, "But the ice, you don't have." And he said, "Yes, I want the water filter for the ice in my water, but I don't drink this shit." And he goes, "Woman, come in here. Taste this water. Is it all right?" And she said, "Yes." He goes, "Right, go away." And I was like, my goodness, this man was just like terrifying. And eventually I was like, "So, are you going to buy it?" He said, "How much is it?" And I told him, and he just yelled at me like how outrageous it was. This is too expensive. And he just yelled at me. I thought,
there's a no.
The funny thing was at the end he said, "Do you take a check?"
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay." I took a check. And I'll never forget. I was like, that was the roller coaster of this was my business. I was out selling in the middle of the night. It was the only time I really felt like I'm a kid. He's a man. He's shouting at me.
That's right.
And then he said yes. And then my plumbers were all older than me. I had these plumbers in vans, and they were all older than me. And I had to say, "Don't screw up when you go out there, because I never want to talk to him again."
That's right.
I don't want him ringing up and telling me you didn't do a good job. But the service experience in selling teaches you so much.
It teaches you so much about the different people and different personalities, and how to manage like rejection, how to manage success. Like then you get the job and you think, "Oh my God, now I've actually I've got to do what I've said I'm going to do." Like,
to deliver.
Yep.
Of course, it's easy to sell.
Yeah.
It's then you've got to deliver.
That's right. So, that massive challenge is there. I always felt that as a family business, that was always a bit of an advantage when all of our opposition were corporate national companies, and you just had that little inroad as a family business because you could ring me anytime, or you'd be there anytime. So I thought they were always good advantages because, as a family, you controlled everything. You didn't have to ask the manager and wait for an answer. It's just like, well, sort of, yes, we can do that. So,
so you're working with your family in a very successful business in South Australia, a divested business, so lots of different ways, and own the supply chain and fishing. When did you decide to become international?
So international happened probably in about 1999. So after the Croatian War, the Baltic War, so Croatia got their independence, and then it was very much, being an ex sort of communist country, everything was pretty much owned by the government. So, as my brother David sort of says sometimes, it was like the country was having a liquidation sale, and they sort of did offer it. They were sort of really reaching out to expats, Croatians that had immigrated to America, Canada, Australia, UK. Does anyone want to come back and build something, create something? So that was I would have been about 25 then. And so
David went over there with your dad.
So David went over there with Dad, and that for me was always an interesting time, because it was sort of, okay, it's pretty much you're in charge of Australia, and I would have been about 25, 26. So, and again, thinking back at the time, we're off to Croatia, and we don't know when we're coming back, but you just keep everything running here. It's like, but okay.
Yeah.
So my mum, again, she was in charge of the office and all the staff in the office. I was in charge of the operational part.
How many staff were you in charge of at 25?
75,
What?
70. So
David and Dad,
they left.
don't know when we're coming back.
Don't know when we're coming back. So and then they first bought a retail business. So I suppose I'd describe it. Imagine if it was like a Harris Scarfs type department store, but broken up into 15 or 20 different stores within an old sort of city in Croatia. So we sort of started with that, and then in about 2000. Then there was an opportunity to take over this resort company, which was called Illyria. And then my brother David, led the charge there with Dad, and they did a takeover of this company with a few other partners, and then all of a sudden, the message comes back. Well, we've bought this rundown Croatian resort. So so after the war, I mean, it was being used for refugees. So run down is the word. So, and for Dad, that was a massive achievement, because that was, you have to think, for him going back, he was 65 when he went back to start that. And that hotel was always there when he was a boy. That's that's connected to the island. So to come off the island, you go into that township, and that hotel was there. So
it had this meaningful connection.
Huge. Yeah.
Thinking like it's a bit random to go from concrete to hotel, but there was this emotional connection there. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's when the family, moved over. Well, the family then started that Croatian business. So then we've got that starting in Croatia, and then our businesses were really growing here in Australia as well. But you sort of think back, and everyone had their job.
The job to do.
And we've talked about this before. There wasn't a lot of crossover. Everyone knew their position, and there was no grey areas. And that's probably why our family has succeeded with family members, is because everyone knows what they're meant to be doing. You're not fighting for that position, or I'm not fighting to be in charge of the group as a whole, or we knew our place, we knew what we were doing, and we just got along and did it.
So we had it in our previous podcast. We've talked to founders and family business leaders about the challenge then of getting to a scale where you run out of family to run the place, and you're starting to bring in non-family leadership. And when did you guys start bringing in people
early
who ran parts?
I would say by the time I had started in 1990, there were two managers. That one was in charge of the curbing, and one was in charge of concrete sales. And then, that changes a little bit. But one of the managers only recently retired. So he was with us like 35 years. So we were very lucky with the people that we got. And then, like any family business, you poach. I think people found working for a family business appealing, though. Like, we definitely poached a few people from the national companies. And but we didn't, at that managerial level, we didn't have too many changes over the years. We were very lucky that we had the right people around us. They enjoyed working for us. And the difference between working for a corporate company or a national company and working for a family business, I mean, they love that directness, that if they need something, and they need an answer on something, they've got it immediately. We don't go into the boardroom and sit there and work out a strategy meeting. Like you and I often talk about this. Like another friend of mine often said, I would have loved to have known what the business plan was. And I'm like, well, that's easy. There just wasn't one. Like, you sort of had a general idea of what you were doing, but you didn't sit there and nut it out. You just, if that's what you need, that's what you get. So I'd always have that sort of saying that, it's not my job to know what you do. It's my job to make sure you've got everything you need to do your job. So, and I think as a family, we were very good at that, making sure they had everything they needed to perform. And
it's interesting in how many studies and how much research shows that one of the things that smart people and motivated people are motivated by is having the tools that allow them to do their job well. And one of the things that frustrates them and leads to low productivity is not having the tools to be able to do what they want to do.
Yep.
And there's Alan saying the family business was focused on getting smart people and saying, what do you need to do your job well?
And not micromanaging. That's one thing that we did as a family. We didn't really micromanage. That's what you think you need. If that's what you want to do, you go ahead.
So that type of culture, I think, is the big corporates are really trying to adapt a lot of this into their organisations, and so it comes from I think family businesses have a lot of that.
Yeah. So, the other thing about a family business too, I think there's nowhere to hide. If you're actually not performing, I find it really stands out. Whereas in corporate world, you probably can hide a little bit under all the layers of management. And but in saying that, we were very lucky. We had a really good management team all the way through, and so that's probably a sign of those times. Now that would be a different story. I would even say, from the time we sold those businesses, it was already changing.
So let's go there. We talk a lot about growing businesses and these fabulous growth stories and ideas. And Deborah and David go to Croatia and it happens again.
Yeah. We were pretty much all in on that too. And it happened again.
It happened again. And we'll get in a moment, we'll talk about the number of times Alan says, well, these very smart management people, and that's not him. And you go, I think it probably is, because you end up running everything. But you've got these growth stories, you've got this success in the family. The families knows what their jobs are and they get on really well doing it. And then you decide, well, let's reverse not reverse the success, but let's reverse the growth story and start divesting. Tell us about that moment in time, because that's a real about face, right?
Absolutely massive for us. And I think it sort of came out of nowhere. We weren't really expecting it. Again, going to work every day, everyone's just doing their thing, building the business. The business was successful. And then we had just started to think about, what's going on with these cement prices. So even, with the audience, concrete is what you make from cement. Often people say cement is concrete. Well, cement is the powder. Concrete is what you make from the powder. And we were just starting to question what's going on with some of our opposition, because Adelaide Brighton had the monopoly in the market. You could only buy cement from Adelaide Brighton. We always got along very well with that company, whereas some of our competitors would literally abuse them because, they have a monopoly and you don't have any choice. We were always very friendly with this company. We would share a corporate facility with them and get along well with them. And then one day we just thought we're going to just question are we on the best price for our cement? And so David flew over to Sydney, where their headquarters were, and had a bit of a chat about pricing. And then and we had heard some whispers that Adelaide Brighton were on the move. So they had decided at their corporate level that they were not wanting to just make cement powder anymore, that around Australia they wanted to start manufacturing concrete. So they had started to buy up companies all along the East Coast. And then, just sort of over lunch, here's us talking about our cement price and can we get a better deal? And the CEO of Adelaide Brighton said, well, would you be interested in actually selling your business? And so we were like, oh. So, so it didn't. We went in there not expecting that at all. So then it was on. Then you sort of got to come back and then you actually think about, well, do you actually want to sell your business? And we were very aware that this is probably an opportunity that wouldn't come along again. So, okay, if you can land on a number and you've got to go through that whole process, of course, what are you worth? That's when you actually have to ask yourself then, okay, how are we valuing this company? So we agreed on a method of sale and put our number together and they put their number together. And I remember just meeting in a boardroom on Grenfell Street and they came up with their number and we were like, well, I don't think we like that number. So we said, we'll get back to you. And then David, myself and my father went down to Grange Kiosk there where Grange Jetty is. And we just got ourselves some takeaway coffees. And I can remember, still to this day, there's just a park bench there in front of the Grange Jetty. And we sat down on that bench and just sort of thought, okay, now what are we going to do? Are we going to do this? And the decision was made that we think if we don't take this opportunity now, that we won't get another opportunity. Croatia was proven to be quite successful. We still had our fishing operations. And so we said, okay, we'll do a counter offer. And so I remember just handing the manager in charge of the acquisition this envelope. And he just, oh, no worries. He was back on a plane to Sydney. He just grabbed the envelope and put it in his suitcase and off he went. And I can remember taking my wife to the Fringe that night and we were just about to go in to see a show when the text message came through, like offer accepted. and then we were just like, wait, okay. Right. So then there was like 2-3 months of getting that, of course, then they start their due diligence, getting all that ready. It was a really difficult time for me because you were outside of your comfort zone. You were dealing with this corporate company is now coming in to buy your family business. So there was just so much work to do to get that ready for sale. And of course, it all had to be kept quiet. We weren't telling anybody in the market. That was really specific from Adelaide Brighton's point of view. So in a town like Adelaide, there was only a small amount of people that knew. And then I can remember there was a law firm in Adelaide that we went there, and it was myself, my brother, my mother, my father, our lawyer. And it always reminded me like of a TV show, that huge, ridiculously big boardroom table with all these contracts set up in the middle and like 8 lawyers on their side. You're just thinking, what is this? So I hope that paperwork's correct. Yeah. So we signed off, we did the deal, and then I remember that my sister and my other brother Peter were in Gooja Street at the time, and we went to a local restaurant and celebrated the sale of the business. And then Mum and Dad that night flew to Europe, and they just got out of town straight away, almost like they couldn't handle it. Wow. So they were on a plane off to Europe, and they did some riverboat cruise. And my mum and dad still say to this day, they were 2 days into the cruise, and my dad turned to my mum and said, do you even know where we're going? And she's like, I've got no idea. And then Adelaide Brighton said, you can announce at 10 a.m. on this date. And I remember that just being so weird, that then at 10 a.m. you could then, get your employees, and, you had to tell them, these are people that have worked for you for 25 years, 30 years, that, you have sold your business. Yeah. So, and then having to prepare, those employees about, okay, and how do you make the transition from a family business into a corporate company, and what did they require from you? And, but that classic Adelaide thing, my phone was running hot by, I reckon, if it was announced at 10 a.m., by 10:10, there's like so many messages on my phone. Like it just went like wildfire through Adelaide that we had sold Davalin. And
what were they saying in the messages? Congratulations, well done you?
They were saying congratulations. I will give them that. A few people said a few things, you bastards. So, now what are we going to do? Why did they call us? Like there was a few, of course there's a few companies that were incredibly jealous that, but why did they pick you guys? And they bought 2 companies in Adelaide, and so then overnight they went from no trucks serving Adelaide to 110 trucks. So it's massive for the our opposition that we were out, and then all of a sudden this gorilla had arrived into the market, and they weren't going to muck around. But like I always say, I was happy I was on the right side of that phone call. So,
Yeah. Well, that Kerry Packer famously said, you only get one Alan Bond in your life.
yeah.
And if you don't take the opportunity.
Yeah.
But now lots of business owners and business leaders who go through a sale or a merger or, and particularly, what a great success. We've built something from scratch and somebody's come along and wanted to buy it. What a great success. But building a company comes with a lot of identity.
Absolutely.
Your identity is wrapped up in you're the Tudor Paver guy, even though there's not Tudor Pavers and all of those things. And a lot of business owners really struggle with the idea of who am I if I'm not this? And so in a very short period of time, you've gone from, they want to buy it. We were just negotiating prices, and now we've sold it. You've gone from running a staff of 120 odd people down to
10.
Wow.
So it did happen over a couple of years because then it was a bit like Domino's. Like we'd sold that division, then we had another big precast division, and then it was almost like, well, hang on a minute, now you're sort of left with that, and then it doesn't really work. And so we did sort of think, okay, we find a buyer for that company. We had our quarry, which was unbolted from the concrete sale. We found a buyer for that company. So to exit out, probably, the main sale happened probably in 2017, but it probably took us about 3 years to then exit out of our other bolt-on companies that we had, because it was clearly then time. It's almost like once the main engine was sold, you sort of had to then do something about the other companies that were there. And but the identity thing lingers for years. I mean, that company, they bought the name as well, so that was Davalin, but it's actually Davalan, so it's sort of David Alan. It is a combined name, and the thing is, it's everywhere. So you're driving along the road, and there's 25 Davalin trucks. They kept the branding, which shocked me, for years. Like they've only just recently, now in 2025. Changed their branding.
It's 10 years.
Which makes me pretty proud that they kept that like 6-7 years, that name. But it's everywhere. You drive down the road, there's a Davalin truck. You drive around, there's a Davalin truck. So where's he going? What's he doing? Look how dirty that truck is. Like,
I was going to ask you about
that. And that's another bit of a problem, that it's sort of always in your face. I suppose one good thing is that we moved out of the offices. I can remember that's almost like you are tied to that land. I mean, I went there as a 17-year-old boy, and then all of a sudden at 47, whatever I was, you had to leave, like, and that was really strange. So and even to this day, my father will say, we've got this tank, and it was in the yard down at Gilman. You should go and get that tank because you need that for that job up there. And I'm like, well, we sold that like 7 years ago. Yeah, but it could still be there, he said. So, but the identity thing is massive, and it takes years. I don't know what other family owners or people that have sold businesses have felt about it, but for us, you just didn't realize how entrenched you were, and it is part of you. Like, and I would say it's only in the last 18 months that I will see a truck going down the road and won't really think about it. What's it doing? What is it up to? So
would you have done things differently looking back at the whole process of your family business selling? That there's 3 years where you were
No, I think the timing of that, looking back, the timing of it was perfect, because I felt that just as we sold, things were getting a bit litigious, which just wasn't in the market before. And I really felt that at the time of our sale, like contractors and building companies were winning work by underquoting and then clawing back. So I just would find all the time that people weren't paying their invoices in full. It's like tipping. Like they'd be just like taking 3,000 off, 4,000 off, 5,000 off, or just like arguing over something that was just ridiculous, where you knew straight away that legal cost would cost you more than giving them the credit. A lot of that was happening, and which became not fun anymore. I just sort of found like the other saying, I sort of felt like, the bell would ring and you'd be in the boxing ring every morning.
Yeah.
And business wasn't like that prior to that. It was enjoyable and you felt like you were forming networks and building relationships. And then it just sort of felt like it was going down that road, which did sort of annoy me. So timing was perfect. Then, of course, COVID hit. Yeah. And then I just think, oh, my goodness. I mean, imagine having all of that staff and having to have dealt with COVID and what were you going to do and things like that. So, but the timing was good. But I always say we were very disciplined as a family. I think one thing that we did that I'm quite proud of is that we didn't launch into the next big thing. We sat back and we waited. We just did a couple of little things, but really we sat back and just thought, okay, now what are we going to do?
So what do you do now?
Well, now, like I say, like we joke, I'm in the construction and waste management business now. so now it's property. So we sat back for a while and then we just thought, right, okay, so we've always been in property, so now we invest in commercial property, but particular commercial property. Something that, but the last two properties that I've bought and renovated and then leased have both been sold off 80-year-old gentlemen that have gotten to their journey and they're 80, their building needs, hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on it and they just can't do it anymore. And they're, offloading their properties, and I've picked up two of those properties.
So that generational shift
there's a real generational shift. Yeah, and then they're just quite unique properties that they're not hard work but not easy. Not going to be sold to somebody who's just wanting a rental return. So and that's what I'm pretty good at now. I've got a really good
the Marapara. Lazy boy, the lady, tea.
That's
right.
It's
a bit of a theme.
It's moved on a little bit.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, got myself again, it's all about who you're working with. I got an excellent team around me, and you can just renovate these properties, turn them around. So, and then one of the things that we did also was, with my father and going back to Croatia and investing back there, he was very risk averse to debt, and so he did sort of say, well, not too keen on borrowing too much money, but he said, I'll sell a prawn boat. So we had a prawn boat, which we sold. And then that money was used to invest in Croatia. And then one of the things we did was actually when the opportunity came that we knew that there was a prawn boat coming back on the market, we reinstated that prawn boat. Which my father says that I lost a prawn boat when I went and invested in Croatia. But so we always had two prawn boats, and now we've got another one. So I felt like that was almost just reinstating what we theoretically had to sell to invest in Croatia.
Yeah, part of the roots of the business.
That's right. So
one of the things that you probably and our listeners will see and hear is Alan's got a very lovely style, and his leadership style is very authentic but pretty authoritative. And Alan and I would talk quite a few years ago about him saying, well, I'm not really management material and that sort of stuff. And I go, are you kidding me? You're doing it anyway. And there are some people that you put in a situation and it will just end up running it, whether they realise it or not. I think there was a few years ago you didn't realise that you just naturally did it, but it was one of the things that I noticed. And we did a fundraising thing together, and before you knew it, Alan's running it. And then you joined a car club a few years ago. We collect some cars together, and Alan's got some cars as well. And Alan joined a car club, and who runs that car club now?
That would be me.
Well, what is it about Alan that you see as a leader that you really admire? From why are you all of a sudden running all these things? Because
I think there's a Alan is trustworthy, and exudes a trustworthiness, but also, and in doing that, there's a ferocity of purpose that if you're not going to do it properly, Alan will very quickly, he doesn't even have to speak, and he looks like, if you're not doing it properly, he goes, And if you suggest that you're going to do something inappropriate or cut a corner, you'll see you stick his finger up and just say, nope.
That's right.
It's a very powerful no, and there's, I think it's underestimated that Alan talked about before, about the people coming from corporate enjoying working for a family business because they could get things done, they could get answers. And sometimes I think in corporate world as well, what you don't hear is no. People are afraid to say no, or they're afraid of what no means, or all that sort of stuff. But Alan's no means no, and Alan's yes means yes, and it's very clear. And I think that people are attracted to that clarity of purpose, and it builds trust, and people trust Alan.
Yeah.
He's also got a big presence. There's got something to be said for having a big body and a loud voice, but certainly it's no surprise that Alan floats to the top. And I think there's a combination of things there. There's a combination of that authenticity, but knowing the language, knowing how to treat people respectfully, not getting distracted as well. If you think about, Alan talked about people saying, well, where was your business plan? I don't think they didn't have one. It was just not your convention for a business plan.
That's right. It's very different.
Is not the convention we're working to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we're not following those principles. We're just not following it the way you do it.
Yeah.
I think in a similar way to some of our other guests, David Bowley just recently said it is, there's a level at which you're drawn to convention because you're just drawn to convention because that's the way people expect to buy or all that sort of stuff. But other than that, we'll choose the unconventional. And I think that's you as well, where convention is the convention, follow the convention.
Yep.
But everything else, no.
That's right. Fair enough.
We'll not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you did follow convention, you'd be like everybody else and you'd be normal.
Absolutely. You're out there just taking a few chances every now and then as well. Roll the dice and see where it lands.
So now going forward, is it still a wait and see, or is it a we'll see? What is going forward?
The most interesting thing now. So the last few years has been solid. I think we've built up a few, done a few property deals. We've gone back into the commercial fishing side of things. But the most interesting thing now is certainly in the last 12 months, which both my brother and I and my sister and my other brother Peter, you're dealing with elderly parents now. So now these founders, my father will be 89 years old in November. This is a man that enjoyed his life. He, enjoyed his wine. He enjoyed his cigarettes and smoked 40 a day and up until about 83 years old. How he's still alive with all this partying and smoking, but he's alive because of his Mediterranean diet, which is just that natural European way of eating. And but now you have to start actually out of respect for him. There's a bit of pump on the brakes. So you have to be quite disciplined now. If something came along that you just couldn't say no to, well, fine. But at the moment, that's the most interesting part of being in a family business, is when, the founders are getting older now. So you don't want to put them under stress or, and that's, it's an interesting thing to watch as they get older. Well, I think you've also made the comment once before, people who start with nothing, have this enormous fear as they get older that they're going to end up with nothing. So you've got to balance that as well. So in a nice way, it's quite a beautiful thing, really, that you're now focused on, family and you're still running quite a big organisation, but trying to just keep the path as smooth as possible. We don't want too many bumps in the road. which is just out of respect for, my father and my mother. So,
has he expressed and your mother expressed what they would like in the business and how you would like to keep running it, or your
my father is always expressing ideas. So I always laugh that like, how long is this apprenticeship that I'm doing?
Yeah.
So I'm 52 years old now, in my 32nd year of this apprenticeship. Like, is there a time where, you stop teaching me? And he said, no. So, you're always got ideas and you should be doing this or doing that and stuff like that. So, but no, steady as she goes is where we're at the moment. And that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know. I was asked by somebody recently whether I was over learning things the hard way. Don't know who that was, Al, but whether I was over learning things the hard way. And I said, well, when I start becoming disinterested in learning things, better put me in a home.
Yeah.
Because that's learning things and discovering things means, and if you're curious, it just means you're going to get bumps every now and then. But in your case, what you're saying is actually in some cases, curiosity kills the cat. We don't want to have too much going on all at once for a period of time. And there's a whole movement of idea, again, in this fast-moving digital age and all of that sort of thing, around the idea of doing less. And actually, in doing less, achieving more, not filling up the world in your head full of noise, but actually slowing it down and actually seeing more. And there's a lot of value in that. And
it's a huge amount. It's not saying we've always got projects on, but it's just keeping it at a manageable pace that, you just don't want, too much noise is a great way to describe it. I mean, because it's just, I've got a young family, then you're the classic that you're in that sandwich that they talk about. You've got young children, elderly parents, still got a significantly large family business. That's enough noise. So, and we'll see what happens next.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to say, Alan, you talk about, I know you mentioned some of your arts that you want to talk about is keeping business tidy, and that's something that you would like to do. Your parents can feel, right, Alan's going to make sure family business is tidy. I'm thinking, like, back when you were 18, like, part of your whole, Alany is that 18, you were lining up the bricks, keeping it tidy back in the warehouse when you're 18. Like, what does a tidy business look like now?
I think when I talked about that, I've got a few other friends who, same situation, European families. It was pretty clear that their bookwork side of things were not the best. And there must have been something going on in the 70s and 80s where they were just obviously advised by their accountants to structure things in such complex, detailed ways that were just ridiculous, and messy. So when one of the things that my brother and I have been doing over the last few years is just unpicking the ball of rubber bands. It's like they went out of their way to have these complicated business structures. So we've been spending a lot of time tidying that up, making sure that there's just this clear division between multiple companies that you have as a family. And my father would be a classic for having multiple loans going left, right, and center. It's just tidy this up. So we definitely know which column is which and who owns what and who owes who. And whereas I think a lot of these European families, they just, it was a very messy structure. So moving forward, that's one of my real goals, is to make sure that, as Dad's getting older and my mother's getting older, that that what is left is as neat as it can be. That any accountant can come in and go, oh, that's the structure. There's not this mystery of what was that deal and who owns that. And I've spoken to a couple of other families recently, and it's really messy. They are not planning for the next generation. Well, they're going to leave that following generation a real mess to tidy up. So that's a big thing for myself and my brother. Keep things as clean now. sort of take on some of those habits of, creative accounting, you might want to call it, to a point, So, if there's one thing that, I want to make sure I do for the future is that, that the companies are in a very tidy state. So, for that next generation.
What a nice place to wrap up. Nicely done, Millie. Alan, you've had a tough day and it's, you're just in a bad mood. We've all had them where there's multiple things going wrong all on the same day. But you're driving home and a song comes on the radio, and no matter how mad you're still trying to be, you just can't stay mad with the song on. What is it?
Oh, for me, for sure. I heard this song the other night and I thought, that's definitely the song, which is the Black Sorrows, Never Let It Go.
Yeah.
That one will always get cranked in the car.
Yeah.
So, and then recently I've been getting into this Benson Boone guy with his song Beautiful Things. I tell you what, you see me at the stoplights now, like, don't go looking inside.
Singing along. Fantastic. Yeah. Beautiful. What a wonderful discussion. Thank you for sharing your time with us today,
Thank you for having
Alan.
me.
It was
been great.
Wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Cheers.